Let's dive into the world of vintage lenses and how even an extremely budget lens can bring a touch of magic to your modern digital mirrorless camera. Case in point is the Pentax 50mm f2 SMC lens may be a budget-friendly vintage lens, but don't underestimate its capabilities. With its compact size and classic rendering, this lens can add a unique flair to your digital photography. Furthermore, even if this lens is quite the gem, is it the right vintage lens for you? Let's discuss. Starting off with a little history, this lens was manufactured between 1979 and 1985 with two different versions. The earlier version was with a metal barrel, with a later version with a plastic barrel. My version is the plastic barrel. Understand that this lens is completely manual. The SMC coating on this lens was first introduced in 1971, and this was the first lens multi-coating. The SMC coating is a big part of the reason why Pentax lenses have such a huge cult following. The lens is super compact, and even with the plastic barrel, it has a solid feel and good build quality. My version has a very smooth focusing ring. The aperture clicks accurately and feels very solid, especially for a lens with this much age on it. Did I mention this lens is budget friendly? I mean really budget friendly. Looking around on the internet, I found this lens in excellent condition for as little as $30, and I found ugly but usable lenses for as little as $9. I got my copy of this lens out of a grocery bag full of vintage lenses that I only paid $18 for. This lens is super friendly on your wallet. The specs are interesting to discuss, but let's talk about the important things. Is this lens sharp? For those of you that are new to the channel, I like to use the same sign to test sharpness. I've used this sign for so many different lenses that it makes it easy for me to compare very quickly to see if a lens stacks up. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button for future reviews as well. With the Pentax, this is a bit of a mix. Shooting the sign wide open at f2, the image is a little soft and has a fair amount of vignetting. This can be fairly common for some vintage lenses. See here though, that once the lens is stepped down to f4, the vignetting is mostly gone and the lens is nice and sharp. This is not a deal breaker because there are times when a little softness is nice, like say with a portrait. But this is something to be aware of if you're going to pick up one of these for yourself. This is where I think this lens really shines. It was a joy to carry around, and it really produces some awesome images. I had the opportunity to use this lens on the Sony A7 II to take images of desert wildflowers. See here that this lens did a great job with the purple and yellow flowers, as well as producing this sunburst during sunrise. Additionally, after the sun came up, I was able to get some really nice images on the flowers. And even this shot of where the light was just hitting the tops of these yellow daisies. The lens performed great. As well as being a good general lens to carry around with you while shooting landscapes, this lens is also useful for so much more. Note here the vignette of the mantle. The lens handled this scene great and did really well with all the whites and neutrals in the scene. This lens can also be used for portraits. For this headshot, I had to get a little close, but that helped to add a little blur to the background, even though I couldn't stop down to say f1.4 or 1.2 for those razor thin depth of field shots. The 2.8 on this lens was a great balance of lens sharpness and a blurry background. Lastly is an image that shows that this lens is really good with colors and does really awesome job with shallow depth of field, even at f2. The focus here is on the knife and it has nice detail as the rest of the image blurs out very quickly. While I don't shoot a lot of video, I know it's something that a lot of people want to know about. Mounted on the Sony A7 II, this lens does well. The field of view of the 50mm works great for tight shoots like you see here, or for talking head videos like you're seeing now as I'm shooting with the Pentax 50mm on the Sony A7 II. For video, I think this lens does great. So far, all I've talked about are the things that I like about this lens, but there were some things that I really didn't like about this lens as well. The biggest thing that I didn't like about the Pentax 50mm was the really small focusing ring. While I was out shooting, I found myself accidentally hitting the aperture while focusing. I expected I would get over this in time using the lens, but this was really small for my fingers. Most importantly was the softness at f2. I know that most lenses need to be stopped down a couple of spots to be their sharpest, but I really am used to f1.4 or 1.7 vintage 50mm lenses where I'm usually pretty much good to go at, say, f2. So being forced to lose a stop of light would be something that would be hard for me to do. The last thing I didn't really like about this lens isn't really the lens as much as it is the size of the adapter that's needed to mount it on the Sony mirrorless cameras. Once you add the adapter, this lens really isn't that compact compared to my other vintage 50mm lenses. One of the biggest pluses for this lens is its compact size, and if the adapter neutralizes this plus, it's really hard to get on board with me carrying this lens. After doing a little homework, this lens has split camps between people that really love this lens and people that don't. I was really surprised at how divisive the split was. So if you use vintage Pentax lenses already and you have the adapter and carry it with you, it might be good for you to pick up this lens since you already have the adapter. Also, if you shoot with modern Pentax cameras that still use the K-mount, you might actually be able to shoot with this lens without an adapter, which would be really cool. For the person on an extreme budget and wants to experiment with a vintage lens, this lens is an extreme bargain. This lens will let you experiment with your creativity with a vintage lens and see if you like it. If you don't like it and it doesn't work out, you're only out a few dollars. And in the world of photography, that is a cheap date. If you are a person that wants the best of the best and price is no issue, this lens is probably not for you. But if you want to stick in the Pentax vintage lineup and you want that shallower depth of field and say maybe a sharper image at f2, maybe the vintage Pentax f1.7 is a better option for you. Or if you want to look outside of the Pentax lineup, sky is the limit with vintage 50s. They come in so many different price ranges and have so many different opportunities. This lens probably isn't for me. I liked shooting with it, but I have other 50s that I prefer shooting with more. But I did really enjoy taking this lens for a spin. What are your thoughts on the Pentax 50mm f2? Let me hear about it in the comments below. And until next time, enjoy your photography journey. To see more, click on the video that YouTube thinks you would like most.